What if the thing you do every single day, something you genuinely believe is good for your dog, is actually the very thing quietly breaking them from the inside? Not physically, not in a way you can see, but mentally, emotionally, deep inside, the part of your dog that decides whether life feels safe or terrifying. And the scariest part? Your dog cannot tell you. They cannot sit across from you and say, "Hey, this is hurting me." They can only show you, and most owners never even notice the signs until it is too late. Stay with me, because what I am about to share with you is something most dog owners go their entire lives without knowing. And once you hear it, you will never look at your dog the same way again. Let's start with a story. Imagine a man named Daniel. Daniel loves his dog more than anything in the world. His golden retriever, Max, is 3 years old. Beautiful dog, friendly, energetic, always wagging his tail. Daniel feeds Max the best food, takes him to the vet regularly, buys him toys, lets him sleep on the bed. By every visible standard, Max is a loved and well-cared-for dog. But something strange started happening around Max's second birthday. He began chewing furniture when left alone. He started barking at nothing. He would pace back and forth near the door for hours. He snapped at a child in the park one afternoon, completely out of nowhere. Daniel was confused, heartbroken. He told his vet, "I do everything right. I don't understand what's happening to him." And here is where things get interesting. The vet ran tests. Everything came back normal. No pain, no illness, no physical problem at all. So what was wrong with Max? The answer had nothing to do with food, exercise, or medical care. It had everything to do with one specific pattern in the way Daniel interacted with Max every single day. A pattern so common, so normalized, so deeply woven into modern dog ownership that almost nobody questions it. And that pattern is what we are going to talk about today. But before I tell you exactly what it is, I need you to understand something about how your dog's brain actually works. Because without this, the rest of this video will not make complete sense. Dogs are not small humans in fur coats. I know that sounds obvious. But the way we treat them, the way we talk to them, the way we structure their lives, suggests that, deep down, most of us actually believe they are. We project human emotions onto them. We assume they understand the world the same way we do. And that single assumption is the root of almost every behavioral problem that silently develops inside a dog's mind. Your dog's brain is wired for one primary thing above everything else. Not food, not toys, not even love in the way we understand. It is wired for predictability, for a clear, consistent understanding of what the world around them means. Dogs are pattern recognition machines. Every single moment of every single day, their brain is asking one question. Is this safe, or is this a threat? That's it. That is the core operating system of a dog's psychology. And when that system cannot find a reliable answer, when the patterns keep shifting, when the signals they receive keep changing, something starts to break down inside them. Not dramatically, not all at once. Slowly, silently. Like a crack forming in a wall that looks perfectly fine from the outside. Now I want you to think about something. Think about the last time your dog did something you did not want them to do. Maybe they jumped on a guest. Maybe they pulled on the leash. Maybe they barked at another dog. What did you do? If you are like most dog owners, the answer changes depending on the day. Sometimes you corrected them firmly. Sometimes you ignored it because you were tired. Sometimes you laughed because it was kind of funny. Sometimes you gave them a treat to distract them. Sometimes you yelled. Sometimes you felt guilty and then gave them extra cuddles afterwards. Does any of that sound familiar? Here is what your dog experienced in each of those moments. Confusion. Pure, unprocessed confusion. Because the same behavior produced a completely different response every single time. And remember what I just told you. Your dog's brain is constantly trying to map the world, constantly trying to understand cause and effect, constantly trying to answer the question, what does this mean? When the answer to that question keeps changing, the brain does not just shrug and move on. It starts to produce stress hormones, cortisol, the same chemical that floods your body when you feel anxious or threatened. And here is the part that most people never realize. When a dog lives in a state of chronic, low-level confusion, that cortisol does not just spike and disappear. It accumulates over weeks, over months, over years. And it begins to physically change the way the brain functions. This is not a metaphor. This is neuroscience. Studies on chronic stress in canines have shown that prolonged unpredictability actually affects the prefrontal areas of the dog's brain, the areas responsible for emotional regulation and impulse control, which means that over time, a dog living in an inconsistent environment literally loses some of their ability to stay calm, to think before reacting, to cope with even small amounts of stress. That is what was happening to Max. That is why he was chewing furniture, barking at nothing, pacing, snapping. He was not a bad dog. He was a dog whose brain had been slowly rewired by years of inconsistency, and he was drowning in anxiety he had no way to express. But here is where it gets even deeper. Because inconsistency is not just about how you respond to bad behavior. That is only one layer of the problem. There is another layer underneath it that almost nobody talks about. Think about your dog's daily life for a moment. What time do they wake up? What time do they eat? What time do they go for a walk? When do they get attention? When are they alone? For most dogs in most households, the honest answer to all of those questions is, it depends. It depends on your schedule. It depends on your mood. It depends on whether you had a long day at work or a relaxing weekend. It depends on whether you felt like going for a walk or decided to skip it. For you, that flexibility feels completely normal. You are a human being with a complex life and ever-changing demands. That makes total sense for you. But your dog does not have a complex life with ever-changing demands. Your dog has one life, and that life is almost entirely controlled by you. They cannot go for a walk when they want to. They cannot eat when they are hungry unless you decide to feed them. They cannot choose their environment, their company, their stimulation. Every single important variable in their existence is determined by another creature whose behavior they cannot predict. Now imagine being in that position. Imagine if every fundamental aspect of your life, food, movement, safety, social contact, was entirely dependent on someone else, and that someone else was unpredictable. Sometimes warm, sometimes cold, sometimes structured, sometimes chaotic, sometimes present, sometimes gone for hours with no warning. How would that feel? That is the psychological reality of millions of dogs right now, living in homes where they are deeply loved but chronically confused. And the tragedy is that the owners love them genuinely. That is never the question. The question is whether love alone is enough. And the uncomfortable truth is that it is not. Love without structure to a dog is like sunshine without ground. Warm, but nothing to stand on. Now I want to tell you something that might surprise you. And this is the part of the video where most people have what I can only describe as a quiet internal shift. A moment where something they always sensed but never quite understood suddenly becomes clear. The reason this mistake is so hard to see is because it masquerades as kindness. Think about it. When your dog looks at you with those eyes and you give in, that feels like love. When you decide not to correct them because you do not want to seem harsh, that feels like compassion. When you change your mind about the rules because you feel guilty, that feels like empathy. Every single act of inconsistency, in the moment, feels like the loving choice. It feels like you are being flexible, sensitive, kind. But your dog is not experiencing your internal intention. They are only experiencing the external behavior. And the external behavior, no matter how loving the intention behind it, is sending a signal that says the world around you cannot be trusted to make sense. And a dog who cannot trust the world to make sense cannot relax. They cannot truly rest. They cannot feel the deep, settled sense of safety that every dog needs to be psychologically healthy. Here is something I want you to sit with for a moment. Have you ever watched a dog in a well-structured home? I mean a truly well-structured home. Not a strict or harsh environment, but a calm, consistent, predictable one. These dogs have a particular quality to them that is hard to describe at first. They seem settled, not lethargic, not bored, settled. They can lie down and actually rest without scanning the room. They can meet new people or animals without going into a spiral of anxiety or aggression. They can handle a minor disruption to their routine without falling apart. That settledness is not a personality trait. It is the result of a brain that has been given what it needs: clarity, consistency, a world that makes sense. And that is what every dog deserves. Not perfection, not military-level discipline, just the quiet, reliable reassurance that comes from knowing what to expect. Now let me give you something practical to hold on to, because I do not want this to just be an awakening without direction. The shift does not require you to become a different person. It does not require expensive training programs or hours of daily work. It starts with one simple commitment, and that commitment is this: pick 3 things and make them non-negotiable. Just 3. The time your dog eats, the time your dog goes for their main walk, and one clear rule about something your dog currently does that you sometimes allow and sometimes do not. It does not matter which 3 things you choose. What matters is the consistency. What matters is that your dog begins to experience those 3 things as absolutely reliable, as certain, as something they can count on no matter what kind of day you are having. When that reliability starts to build, something happens in the dog's nervous system. The background hum of low-level stress begins to quiet. The cortisol levels begin to normalize. The brain, slowly but genuinely, starts to relax its constant state of vigilance. And you will see it. Not immediately, but within weeks you will notice your dog seems calmer, less reactive, more able to just be. That is not a small thing. That is the beginning of a genuinely healthy mind. But I want to go one level deeper still, because there is one final piece of this that I have not told you yet. And this is the piece that will truly change how you think about your relationship with your dog. Most people think about dog training as teaching the dog, as shaping the dog's behavior, as getting the dog to do what you want. And yes, that is part of it. But at the deepest level, what you are really doing when you create consistency is not training your dog at all. You are communicating something to them that no amount of treats or commands can say. You are communicating that you are trustworthy, that you are a safe presence, that the world you are responsible for is one they can count on. And to a dog, that is the most profound form of love that exists, not the cuddles, not the treats, not the baby talk and the belly rubs, as wonderful as those things are. The deepest love you can give your dog is the love of being a creature they can count on, a presence that makes their nervous system feel safe. Because when a dog feels safe in that deep neurological way, everything changes. Their personality opens up, their playfulness returns, their anxiety softens, their reactivity decreases. They become, in a very real sense, more fully themselves, because they are no longer spending their mental energy managing a world they cannot understand. They are free. And that is what Max eventually became, by the way. Daniel did not overhaul his entire life. He made 3 things consistent: feeding, time, morning walks, and he stopped letting Max jump on guests every single time, no exceptions. Within 6 weeks, the furniture chewing stopped. Within 3 months, Max had not snapped at anyone. Within a year, Daniel said it felt like he had a completely different dog. He did not have a different dog. He had the same dog, finally living in a world that made sense. So here is the realization I want you to carry with you after this video. The mistake that silently destroys a dog's mind is not cruelty. It is not neglect. It is not a lack of love. It is the quiet, well-intentioned, completely invisible pattern of inconsistency that most loving dog owners practice every single day without ever realizing what it costs their dog. And now you know, which means you can change it. Not perfectly, not overnight, but you can start today. You can choose 3 things and make them reliable. You can begin to become the kind of presence your dog's brain has been quietly begging for since the day you brought them home. That is it. That is the secret that hides in plain sight. If this video made something click for you, if you found yourself nodding along and thinking about your own dog in a new way, I want you to subscribe and stay close to this channel because we go deep here. We talk about the things that actually matter for your dog's well-being, the psychological stuff, the stuff beneath the surface, the stuff that changes everything, and your dog is worth that kind of attention. I think you already know that. That is why you watch this far. Take care of that dog. They are counting on you in ways you are only beginning to understand.